All information contained in this podcast is general in nature and does not consider your individual circumstances. You should consider the appropriateness of this information with regards to your individual objectives, financial situation, and needs. Welcome to Sharing More Than the Sheets, a podcast to help you and your partner make better financial and lifestyle decisions so that you can both focus on the things that you love. I'm your host, Michael Khouri, financial planner, green thumb, husband, and just dad. Whether it's to build team skills, personal fitness, or resilience, most parents dream of having their children play a sport one day. For some children, it's a walk in the park, but for others, it's a journey. Today, to help some parents start or navigate this journey, I've invited the Jason Akermanis to be on the show. Jason, thank you so much for your time.
No worries, Michael. Yes, it is. Sometimes it's a dream for many parents, or it could be a simple nightmare. I mean, you see, unfortunately, in the good and the bad, you see parents who, of course, were great athletes and didn't quite make it, or you see ones that just, see a little bit of talent in their kids and would love them to be professional sportsmen. There's always something wrapped up in there. There's very few parents that I think are not somehow invested in that whole process. There's very little of, I don't really care if he does it or not. But there's no doubt that there's two components to all of that.
Yep. Because, for yourself, I'll be honest, as a kid, I never followed AFL. I didn't follow much sport, but I just knew you as the blonde guy on TV that was always kicking goals. And literally, I think to a lot of people, most people do know you, but those that don't, well, as soon as they see you, they'll recognize you instantly. And you're Queensland's second Brownlow medalist in 2001. You're a key member of the Brisbane Lions triple premiership sides for 2001, 2002, 2003. You retired in 2008, but
2010.
2010.
Don't rob me of 2 years. It was a long 2 years too, let me tell you.
No, done. I think, where did I get 2008 from? I must have read it from
Uncle
somewhere.
Google. I was leading goal kicking in 2009, and then, I don't know, maybe Uncle Google's let you down. Yeah,
Still, how long is that? How many decades?
Well, that in years, it's 16 years. So that's, 2010, that's 11 years ago. I think, 325 games that should be. So Wikipedia might have let you down there. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
Someone's because Wikipedia, other people can edit it, so they could be wrong,
Yeah, that's true. Unless the article was from 2008.
Oh, possibly.
But saying that, 16 years in on the professional field. But before that, how many years would you say? At what age did you start playing AFL?
Well, I started Aussie Rules when I was about 7, I reckon. I think I started kicking the footy pretty young, so I was always around the footy club. I was very lucky. Where I was born, at a place called Mildura. My mum was from Brisbane, but when we were down there, she was going out with one of the players at the time anyway. So I inadvertently would always be down watching the seniors play because I think my mum's boyfriend was playing at one stage there. So it sort of transitioned from just kind of watching and just seeing my, I suppose, other local heroes back then, and then playing probably a good, 7, 8, 9. So probably a good 2 or 3 years in Mildura before, in under 11s, mind you, because we didn't really have an age group that was younger than that. So I had to always play up against bigger kids, which was good. You learn how to get rid of the ball and not get hurt. So when we came back to Brisbane, that would have been sort of 85, 86. So it would have been sort of 8 or 9. And once I came back here, we happened to move around the corner, which is a bit of the universe's good luck. But Mum had been brought up on the south side of Brisbane, but then she moved to the north side of Brisbane to a place called Albion. And around the corner from Albion was the most powerful club at that stage and the biggest club in many respects, the main footy club. So I ended up starting there as a 9-year-old under 10s. I think I might have been turning 10. So, yeah. So I was already playing Aussie Rules footy, but to come to Queensland and play, and I didn't know about rugby league or rugby union. So for me, it was like, oh, yeah. Plus they were big kids who used to tackle and hurt you. And I was like, these guys are too big for me. And I really didn't want to get hurt. So I stuffed these guys. I'll just go and play the game I know. And I was already pretty good anyway. So that's how that little bit of transfer from one state to the other inadvertently had a little bit of benefit, it would seem, later on, because I ended up becoming a professional in that sport.
Yeah. And at what age did you work that out? But at what age did your mum work out, or did you work out, okay, this is something that I want to pursue, I want to take it to the next level?
Well, my mum would tell you when she was alive that I was way too active. So, when I was a young kid, I obviously had ADHD, so I was all over the shop, had so much energy and, always trying to, because ADHD really for the brain is pretty simple. We don't make enough dopamine. It's quite common for elite athletes, it's like triple the percentage of the normal population, which sits around 6. It's probably around 17, 18% of all professional athletes diagnosed, undiagnosed, probably a little higher when you think about it. But, some of the biggest sports people on the planet, you name your hero, he's probably got it. And the reason we're so active is because we can't make dopamine, or it doesn't get created and calms our brains down. We always are looking for it. So sport, of course, is the most natural therapy for all those brains. So at probably 5, my mum was told, look, Mr. Akermanis, get him in. He's already in athletics. He's going well. He'll burn up energy doing that, but I think he should be in a team sport because he will excel with that energy because there's a lot more to do. So take him down to Aussie rules. As far as my mum saying, oh, maybe you should do it as a career, well, I think at 14 I was working at that stage. I had a job around the corner, and she was very much of the belief at that stage. So we're probably talking, early 90s, because it wasn't a professional sport. You played it, but you had a job and you went down, you played on weekends. You got paid good money if you're one of the best, but, not huge back then. It was still good money, but of course not very serviceable long term. So my mum was pretty keen for me not to go down that road and put all my eggs in that basket. But of course, a few years later, I nearly died a few years after that at 15 with a bad head injury from rollerblading, which is not much fun, but I had that year off. So I think when I came back at 16 and played with a helmet, but I started to play in the seniors. So before I turned 17, I started to play against men. And that year, I'd already been on the Bears radar in the AFL. They're now the Lions, but back then the Bears, they had local selections. So, for me and Michael Voss and Clark Keating and, Brent Green, all really good local kids. Back then, you could get us before we went to the draft. So, say Leo Barry is a famous Swans player. I played against him in the under-17s carnival. So the Swans picked him up, even though he's from Riverina, but he's in the New South Wales catchment at that stage. So they still do a little bit of that with the academy picks, but that was the way it was then. And even in year 12, I'm playing round 4 in 1995. Like, I'm at a famous rugby union school and they didn't play any Aussie rules. So I didn't have any of my school buddies even know that I was probably playing, except for a couple because they were Aussie rules guys that hadn't played in my team. Most of the time, they either trying to get me to play rugby union. Elton Flatley, who was a famous Wallaby, was in my classes, and him and I were in the same 100-metre, 4x100-metre team for the GPS. So for Nudgy. So it was sort of, I even think at 18, 19, as I went out of school, even though I was still playing 17 games in school, but never knew until probably 99. So we're talking 4 years after that it kind of really started to go professional. In fact, I personally said, "That's it. I'm going to concentrate on this. I'm not going to work any other jobs. I'm going to go get physio and just dedicate myself." And that wasn't quite the full transition, but it'll give you a picture of just sort of how it progressed. It wasn't an absolute lock-in, but my mum, she was alive at that stage, probably saw 95, 96 and half of 97 anyway. So she was probably hopeful, but, I knew I could make it. I was pretty confident I'd play 200 games. So, yeah, it was just a bit of a journey as opposed to an actual hard and fast, look, this is what you're going to do. You're, very few are set for life in some ways.
Yeah. And you do a lot of coaching, and you've seen people get into the game and do well, and those that get into the game and obviously just maybe they commit for a year and suddenly they disappear. Like, as a parent, from the position of a parent, for example, let's say the child isn't in any sport at all. Like, the traditional thought process was, okay, the girl does ballet, the boy does soccer, or the girl does netball and the boy does footy or something like that. But we all know it doesn't work that way. As a parent, where's sort of the best place to start? Because normally if you ask a kid, what sport do you want to do? They probably have no idea. And I mean, to me, the way we did it is we just exposed our kids to different sports and sort of, what do you like? What sort of appeals to you? What do you think is fun? Because as a kid, you normally want to go where your friends go, or you want to do something that you enjoy.
Right. Yes.
What have you seen sort of works in those cases? Because you can't really force a child to do anything, especially a sport.
Yeah, I think what you said before, though, mostly you see kids, their friends are in whatever sport it is, and so they naturally want to hang with their friends. So, I've got 3 daughters. The eldest one was pretty resistant to playing Aussie rules. Eventually her friends started playing. She started getting in it, and then COVID hit. So she probably missed 2 important years last year and this year. She's good enough to be in the Brisbane Lions Academy squad, for example, but she won't go on because she's probably just, look, it's not for her. She's good but not good enough. In her mind, that's okay. It's all cool. But I think you look at Sienna, the middle one, who's 13. She plays golf because her dad loves golf, and she's a really good golfer, and her body is probably more set up. She's much skinnier than the eldest daughter and the youngest daughter, far more my side of the family, which are very fast and powerful and just thicker set. So they're going to enjoy collision sports. So, you look at your kid and part of you goes, look, son, I really don't think you should be playing rugby league because you're just getting beaten up, and you're going to get beaten up. Look at your mum and dad. You know that unless you've got outstanding sort of speed and skill, even that changes probably where you would naturally coerce your kid. So you've got the important part though, with what you said is probably, there's an enjoyment factor. I mean, I think I retired 4 times, over 2 years before I even got into the AFL. So they're hard sports, demanding sports. But, things like nippers and flags and, easy stuff where everyone likes going to the beach. The parents like going to the beach. Netball, all of a sudden you're in a team environment. Look, there are some kids who are born, and I'm probably in that category at some stage, that has written on their cot, does not play well with others. And, those guys are aggressive, want to win, win at all costs. And, it's hard for them to lose, get rejected, etc. But it's okay. It's all part of the learning process. So Sienna, we've got her into water polo because a friend's play. She's pretty good too, like for a sort of slightly build kid who's really growing, who's going to be the tallest out of the girls. But yet golf for her, while it's an individual pursuit, she's far more, I suppose, competent, and she should be playing, say, something like that. She'll miss out on the team aspect, but it's okay because it really is a journey itself anyway. So my advice is always, look, put them into what they love first. Absolutely, no worries. I mean, even Roger Federer only took up tennis very late, but he was playing every other sport, soccer, badminton, like you name it. You wouldn't believe the amount of sport and the hours he had. And they ended up becoming vital for him to become such a good tennis player. He wasn't playing at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, pretty much up to he was nearly 16. So here he is, one of the greats. But because he was doing so many different sports, they all sort of eventually specialise later, and all the data is pretty much the same. Go and do as much as you can, and then later, if you really love something, specialise then. And that's really, because you've got the big drop-off, Michael. You got I turned 18 or 17, I can now drink, I can drive, not together, of course. I can chase the opposite sex. There's so many more distractions. So the drop-off is always around that 16, 17, 18. Of course, you've got pressures on, do I have a career, go to uni, or do I go into sport? So they're the reasons. But, of course, if you can hang in there, persevere, then, you can make it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to, especially if someone's listening to this and their kid's not in any sport at all and they haven't even considered it, I think it's good to sort of highlight the benefits of it because, I mean, there's team building skills. I mentioned earlier, like personal fitness is an obvious one, but even resilience, like mental resilience. I'm guessing that's a massive part of it.
Oh, well, just go and play golf. You want to learn about, you want to see what people are really like. You can ask them all the questions in the world. You go play tennis, or you go play golf, and you see what they have to put up with it because it's generally on them. Probably more golf than tennis because you've got someone else over the other side working against you. But, you'll learn real quick what a person's like. He puts himself under pressure, puts his ball in a crap spot, can't get out, or he's in a bunker, or he's got a putt for a birdie or a point. It could be anything. So you do see the best and worst in that game, I suppose. And that's, I always say the beauty about golf taught me more about not getting so caught up on the result, even though I know that through footy about, not looking at the scoreboard despite there being scoreboard pressure, despite being, the ultimate as far as win or loss is one, the way you do it. And, of course, the scoreboard reflects that generally. So, and in Aussie rules footy, unlike golf, see, there's so many more things that are out of your control in a team sport. So I have way more empathy, when I play, Aussie rules and basketball because other guys let you down. Last night I was playing basketball, some really good players. Man, they gave me a couple of really bad passes and, we couldn't do anything with it. Now, That happens. And instead of, unlike golf, where you'll just bloody berate yourself and give yourself grief for the next 10 minutes, team sport just gives you that little bit of understanding that it's like, life, there's so much more that's out of your control versus what is. And when you do those things well, just how great life really is. And you could just only do your small little part in the team. And then when you go into other careers, which you always will because you can't play sport forever, even golf, you have to stop eventually. Then you go into an office or a workplace, you'll see how good cultures and bad cultures actually mix, because sport will teach you the good and the bad. And I've been in crap teams who came last in the AFL, and I've also been in triple, nearly quadruple premiership teams. So I could see the difference straight up. And you just know what it's like to be around a better group. What does that mean? Do they work harder? Not necessarily. But it's the way they go about the other things, the little things that you don't quite see, and how thorough or fastidious they are, and how they get the detail right, and then they can look at the bigger picture along the way. It's all in sport as well. That's why so many business companies I talk with, I'm talking about sport, and they want me to talk about sport because they're so interchangeable.
But it's a hard one, isn't it? Because, there's that saying, it's not about winning, it's how you play the game. But, it's also about winning. Otherwise, there'd be no scoreboard.
That's right. This generation, fair income, you get a bloody ribbon. That teaches them nothing. We all get rejected. We all have to learn to lose. Not well. I'm not a great loser. But, you could still lose and it still hurts. But, you shake their hand and be sportsmanlike, or you can get beaten to a gong or a prize you really wanted to win. But that's all part of it. And I suppose if you can't get used to the losses, you'll never understand the euphoria and the delayed gratification of winning anything or doing well at stuff.
That's so true. And you mentioned something before, and I really want to get your take on it as a professional footy player. You mentioned not to look at the scoreboard. And I think this sort of applies even in life, looking at your own achievements, or even if someone works in sales, or if somebody has a business and they're looking at their profit and all the rest of it. Was that a rule, not to look at the scoreboard, or only to look at certain times? Or, what did the coaches tell you, or what did the best do?
Well, I think it's a fallacy, because you spend your whole time looking at the scoreboard. How many minutes left? How long have we been going? What's the score? Where's the state of play? It's giving you an instant snapshot. So in some ways, you're more telling them not to get worried about the result. It's more the process. And I think that's what the coaches are generally trying to say. Yeah, we're 6 goals up, but, we're not really playing that well, and we're not doing the things that are going to make. We should be 15 goals up, or we're 10 goals down and it's not that bad. We're just missing a few things here and there. So you always, in some ways, have a scoreboard for yourself. But I think as you get older, there's a couple of things that stand out. Is that it's the comparing yourself to others where the danger is, no doubt. Because, that's where you get jealous, and, this guy's making so much money. He's in real estate, like myself. They're at, Ray White, or they're somewhere out, they're working for another franchise and they're beating you, or they're selling more, or they've got some swish marketing and they've been just around the block a bit more. But that's okay, because that, it's good to know where you're at and where you want to be. So having a scoreboard in life is never a bad thing. We always talk about, enough, when's enough? Like, do you need any more? And I always say it's not about having more. It's more about the purpose of doing things better. So you can get more money and all that kind of stuff, but it's the choices and the time that is the benefit, because then you have more choices to do. You have more time that you can, do whatever you want, basically, if you've got more capital behind you or whatever. So, there's a reason to have those purposes. So always saying that, son, I love you the way you are, don't change. Well, that's just silly, because, of course, if he's got a purpose to be better at something, humans always want to master stuff. They always want to be autonomous, and they just always going to be like that. That's why people do guitars when they've never had any inkling to be good at anything in music, because they need to master stuff. So when you master a skill, or, at work, it gets pretty tedious and boring after that. And then you go, well, what am I going to do now? Oh, we'll go and do something else. And there's no difference as you're getting older and better and more proficient at stuff. And so for parents who have the empathy with their kids to say, don't worry, you're going to improve, you're going to get bigger, you're going to get stronger, that's all part of the whole process. It's not so much about the end, because if that journey, if you're looking back at 90 years of age and going, well, look at all the things I did. You'll always say the ones that, you have a few regrets maybe, but if you did a lot of things, you'd be far happier, no doubt. and you'd have more experience and more relatability and more conversation with anyone you wanted, from 90 all the way down to a little kid.
These podcasts have been brought to you by Better Financial Planning Australia. To book a free 15-minute phone chat, visit betterfinancialplanning.com.au. Well said. And even from the point of view of, I mean, like what you mentioned, you've been in some really good teams, and you've been in some teams that weren't as good. I mean, and this also relates to even someone putting their children through sport. How do you sort of get over the loss mentally? From how do you avoid getting discouraged from something? And we all do it differently, but I guess what's your way? What's your thing? Like if you've come out of a game that you've been training for, you've been looking forward to, you probably thought you were going to win and you didn't win.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, psychologically, there's a few things that always happen. That feeling of disappointment that everyone has. If you're happy with a loss, bloody hell, why would you be even remotely wanting to go out there compete? Because we're not really wanting to go out there, compete and get flogged, would we? We would want to go and compete in whatever we do and have a result that's going to make us feel better. That's why we do it, because we feel better. We have these great little things in our brains that give us endorphins, and we go, oh, man, I love that. I want to do that again. That's the beauty of exercise in any shape or form. That's why every doctor on the planet will tell you, mate, if you're not exercising or doing something, then you can't have these great natural things that have no side effects. I mean, you have to be stupid not to be doing some type of exercise, whether you hate it and enjoy it, but it's always good for you. So losing in bad teams, you generally get this losing's a habit and so is winning. And when you're young, I've played in teams most of my junior careers who weren't really the best team. In fact, they weren't the best team. I never really won any junior premierships. I think I won one, so that's a big stretch of years. Yet how good was it when I went and played in the state teams where you're surrounded by all the best kids in the state, and all of a sudden playing in better teams, it's safer, it's more fun because you've got guys who can do your skills most of the time. Where in your local club, you've got these guys who mum just keeps bringing them down there, or dad, and just says, you got to go play. You let the team down if you don't, who don't want to be there, or are just so poorly skilled, they actually make the whole process pretty dangerous. So I think because they kick it on your head, or they kick it past you, or they handball to your feet, like there's so much that can go wrong with average talent. So I think and then as a parent, you're like, well, let's get you in a better team. You get in a better team, you don't get as much of the ball, or you don't have as big a role, and then your ego gets hurt. So there's all these factors. But for me, the process was always the same. You feel like crap, you go home, you're staring at the ceiling, or you're watching TV trying to take your mind off it. But, of course, you're all thinking about probably the things you did wrong, or you made that error. Geez, I've got to work on my handballs. I missed that tackle, or that goal would have won us the game and I missed it. It was straight in front. So all week for the next week, you're working on those little things that you knew you just need to be a tad better at. Now, the public wouldn't know any of that, but at that level, it's all those little things that only a player or a team within the team sort of culture or the club would know what you need to fix. So you're always working on them. So there's a scoreboard every week, unlike the poor people that have to get work evaluations once a quarter, once a year. If they're lucky, we get it every week, nearly every session. So it's good and bad. You always got something to work on, but you're always in the process. Even when you're winning, man, you're still not at, there's always something in Aussie rules footy, for example, that you can be better at. And that's the beauty about that game. Where in golf, it's always about, can I be consistent, swing, etc. There's so much more complexity in what you're trying to do, but still, you're always working on something.
Yeah, and I think that's something that parents can learn from, or anyone can learn from, but also it's good to know these things to sort of teach our kids, or when our kids come home and they've lost a game and they're feeling down, just sort of to know what to say to them as well, because anyone really, but especially as a parent, if your kid's upset at something, sometimes you don't know what to say, you want to say the right thing. Something else I want to really talk to you about as well is being an outstanding sports person. What I mean by that is, and this is anything, whether someone's in sales or whether they're selling, whether they work at a bakery or they're a sports person, there's a big difference between being good at what you do and being outstanding. And to me, my experience in this is 15 years ago, I used to work in sales, and I was probably one of the best salespeople for a period of time, or one of the best anyway. And the thing for me is I wasn't the best salesperson. I couldn't sell the best out of anyone, but I was probably one of the most consistent in that if I had a big win or two, I wouldn't give up. Whereas I found a lot of other people would sort of that have a win or a good day or a good week, and they'd sort of take their foot off the pedal for the next month or two. And in your situation, I'm guessing you could probably relate to that, because I'm assuming, having a good year or a good 2 or 3 years, you are tempted to sort of take your foot off the pedal and be like, yep, I've made it. I've achieved what I want to do. And I'm guessing it takes this extra bit of energy or this something mentally to sort of want you to keep doing better, or to keep succeeding, or keep kicking goals, or to keep winning, or something.
Yeah, well, you're talking about probably a broader spectrum of where you're at the time. Like when you're 18, you're going to get bigger and stronger, so you're always working, and at some stage you can't get any bigger because it'll become a detriment. You might not be able to get any faster. You could get a bit fitter, but what you're always looking for is this. We talk about the inconsistencies of youth versus the really high level, whether it's sales or sportsmen. Sportsmen's best and worst games are very, smallly separated. They're not big highs and big lows like they are when you're young. 1 week you're kicking 5 goals, next week you're tagged out of it. I'd played in games where I'd had 2 touches for the game in my first year, kicked 2 goals, thankfully, but, at least I did something. And didn't do enough on defense. There's lots of things I could have done better. But, years later, you'd never have a game like that, because on the bad day, you were still getting, say, 15 touches of the ball, but you're making 8 tackles, you're making 4 shepherds, you're tapping the ball on, you're talking to your teammates, you're doing so much more. So I think the difference between good and very good is that the time for rest and celebration are much smaller. You win when you're winning all the time. Early on you're on a bloody bender, fair dinkum. You're out for days. You think it's great. You're on a high, and the next week you come out and get completely whooped. And eventually you learn to be so consistent that while you're winning, you go back to the drawing board on Monday and say, look, this is what we did well. The opposition were doing this opposition this week. Let's look forward. What are we going to do now? So it's always about that process. So, and I've been guilty of it. You have a great week, or you sell lots of stuff. You start drinking your own bathwater, fair income. But the best are always, they have 2 drinks instead of 10. They're back on the job as soon as they can. They're back onto what works, whatever that is, whether it's their, ringing their, buyers, vendors, or sellers, whatever it is. Their network, they're talking to their staff. So there are big differences between, I find, the very best and the nearly so. And I always find it's just that consistency of effort and the good and the bad. So their habits are so smally different that only they would know the difference between an amazing game and was all right. And everyone thinks, hey, man, you played great. You're the best player on the ground. He says, yeah, that was average. And there's not much difference in that, but they know. And that's really the separator. It's, as Confucius said, he said it 500 years ago, it's habits that sets men apart. It's not this mysterious thing called talent and form and all that. That does help if you've got great talent, but there's lots of guys with great talent.
And speaking of habit, again, we've got 3 kids, 8, Elias is 8, Maria's 5, Joseph's 3, so they're young, and I'm about to sort of go through what you've gone through with your children. Elias is just starting to play basketball. He loves it. Maria, she's more creative. Joseph, we should have given him a footy the second he was born, because I think he's born to be a footy player of some sort, that or a wrestler. And there's the 3-year-old.
That sounds like my 3-year-old. Oh my God.
But the thing is, like, it's for us as parents, the hardest. Parents are busy. Anyone is busy enough these days, especially parents. And I wanted to ask you, how do you, from a time management point of view, how do you manage all this stuff as well? Because when kids get into sports, there's training at least 1 or 2 nights a week, and then there's normally a game on the weekend, and then there's extra things, and obviously you can't forget about their education. What tips would you give to someone, as a dad and as a sports person, around the whole time management side of things, and and not sort of getting lazy? Because as parents, we can get lazy and put some things before others.
Well, I'll give you an example. So Charlotte and Sienna and Zoe at the moment is only 3, so she's not really involved in other activities just yet. Sienna is. She's got, I think today, for example, we're working together as a couple always as mum and dad. Okay, well, you go to work, she's working, I'm working. What are we going to do now with picking Sienna up from, let's just say, 4:35? She's finishing netball. like it's a commitment. It's pretty big, but not too bad. Charlotte, she has her activities. We generally try and time in just out of probably convenience for all of us. If you want to play sport, sometimes the options aren't as, they're limited. They're not as open as you like, so you say, no worries. You can do these sports, but you can only do them on the weekend. Now, Charlotte, the 16-year-old, works on weekends, probably most weekends, most days. So the limiting factor for her is always going to be, well, the time and what can't you do. So generally we try and tie it in, as most parents look to do, around their time. Is it attached to school? That's always a bit easier because you're generally going from school to the sport, and then you generally have to pick them up after that, which works in everyone's schedule. Everyone's busy, everyone's getting busier, so it's just this fine balance. But when you've got, say, my cousin who lives 400 metres from my house, him and I are the same age, 5 months apart. His eldest is the same age as my eldest. In fact, they were both due on both our birthdays, 5 months apart. So it's freaky on that part. But he's a really good athlete. Like he's a state. I think he came second in the States on the weekend for triathlon for his age group. Very talented. His mum is a teacher. She's very sporty. So is the dad, my cousin. So they spend every day, the morning and afternoon, working around his schedule. And they've got 3 kids, a boy and 2 girls. So the other 2 probably will grow up with a little bit of neglect, I would feel, because, so much is in that particular person in their family who is the star of the show. The other ones have talent, and they will. They go to acro, and, the middle daughter's always getting accused of being lazy and got more talent than Cooper, the eldest boy. So you're getting these dynamics all the time. But I suppose in the end, our triathletes, even at 16, their demands are intense. They're every day, and their race on the weekend. So the commitment from both Nathan and Aaron is just outstanding. Now, they run ragged and they complain all the time, and we never got any time. They go to sleep at, 8 o'clock, 7:30, 8, and get up, 4:35. Like, they're just crazy like that. But to them, in some way, it works far better in the structure and far better for their family, and also for Cooper, to give him a chance to excel. And that's sometimes the investment in your family. It's sometimes not about just, I can make more money, or I like more rest, or whatever. Because, one day, not too far, he'll be an adult. He'll be driving and doing it himself. And, that's the trade-off. You've always got to make that trade-off. In the end, it's just an investment in what they want to do and what you want to do. And in the end, it works for them.
No, that's so true. And I think it's like anything, any commitment. And as parents, it's all about being a parent's about sacrifice. So I think this is no different to that.
See, we would say, this is the difference with the team I played in. We would say that you don't sacrifice a thing. All you're doing is investing. You invest in us, you invest in the game, you invest in the club. We pay you well for it, don't get me wrong, but we are always investing in our kids and our time. Our time is the most valuable thing in the universe. There's nothing more valuable. Not a dollar will ever change that fact for anyone, because you never get more time. So in the end, that in time and investment, I would think, is to, for a future date, have the choice to do whatever you want with your time. That is everyone's goal, whether it's retirement or just being able to free to go and do what you do for work. So I think that's always the understanding I have as the human condition is, how do I create and do what I want with my time? And so that investment is always about that, whether it's work, as you're doing for those kids. If you could die as the richest man in the cemetery and leave all your kids, well, that's a fair journey, and it's a great thing to pass on. But if you've had no time and you just died unhappy, well, what's the point of that?
Yeah. And speaking of time, what are you doing with your time these days? There's, I've heard you've got your finger in a few pies.
Yeah, I do. I wear many hats, but my day job is my real estate company, Jason Akermanis Properties, Blue Moon. Ascot, Blue Moon are great. They're franchises up the coast, and they're a family company, so I love working for them and with them, even though I run my own show and managing director. I've been lucky enough to do a lot of things. I did the media for many years, as most people would know. I did foreign exchange for many years, which was awesome. Ended up with a couple of startups that we did out of FX when I was in Albury. Got a coaching degree in Albury, so I coached there for many years while we're doing the startups, which were AR, augmented reality. So that's basically dropping bags of money instead of chasing Pokemons and then getting them and going into any merchant on the planet and get discounts, because, we love discounts. But, of course, the merchants love us because we're in their store and buying their coffers, etc. And then we tried to build Bitcoin, which, as a cryptocurrency is the first and pretty much changed the world in some way, certainly in that space. So we wanted to use Bitcoin, but it was rubbish. It's too slow and inefficient and cost too much money. So in the end, we had to re-engineer one of our products, our data protection products, and made a split chain crypto, which is going to be, and it's, it will be the biggest coin going around, and it's a worldwide coin because it's the only one that's compliant and certified. So it's pretty cool. So we were doing that. So you got a few hats there, by all means, like anything, you're trying to build or anything you ever buy, you do your research and do your stuff. But yeah, that was a pretty cool adventure. You wouldn't have thought Aubrey could produce so many amazing worldwide, hits or products so good. But anyway, you get the right people, and we just had a great software engineer and his team, and they did a great job. So I do play basketball, Div 1 Monday nights with the Next Bullets team. That's pretty cool because they're really good at what they do. So they're always ordering me around, and I'm good at passing and get the odd shot in here and there. But, they're all like 6'6", 6'7". It's always pretty cool to play with them. And then I play Div 4 with a couple of buddies who not as talented, but very competitive. So we, I usually play with my cousin who's a good basketballer. And then in the winter, I just play a little bit of Masters footy, and then occasionally, not that often, we do some one-on-one coaching, obviously with the coaching degree, and that's just more like every Aussie rules player has to be good at kicking, and that's generally what I teach, because it's one thing to be a good kick, it's another thing to be a good coach of a good kick. So that'll give you a 11-year span into about 2 minutes 30, I reckon.
Wow. No, it's I mean, honestly, you mentioned at the start staying active and always doing something, so I don't think that looks like it's going to be slowing down anytime soon. No,
I have a gym at home, so it's always good. I think I've learnt. I didn't mention in there, I did do a program out of the States for 3 years, which is, it's been amazing. We did it selfishly for my, Aussie rules team I was coaching, but it turned out to be a lifestyle and genetic changer. So our youngest daughter has benefited, no doubt. She's come out with, she's much bigger, stronger and darker skin than the others, so a bit of epigenetics there. But yeah, it was a cool program called the Tribal Blueprint. Those boys over there, ex-pros like myself, but they were in triathlons, at the Olympic level, and a couple of doctors got together and went, wait a minute, why are we built this way? And it's crazy good. So anyway, I should be pretty active until they put me somewhere when I'm all said and done. But yeah, so it's certainly the key to my brain. I know that. So I reluctantly enjoy it now, a couple of times a week.
Yeah, nice. And one last thing as well, Jason, with all my episodes, I like to finish them off with a dad joke.
Oh, yes, here we go.
So I don't know if you've got a few of your own, but how do you interrogate a cheese toastie?
Don't know.
You grill it.
Yeah. Oh, your kids will love you, I tell you.
Oh, they do. This is actually from a dad book joke my son got me. He goes, a little book of dad jokes.
Well, it gets worse because now I would always say things to my wife, which, of course, they were never old enough to get. They're more husband-wife. You'd say, oh, you might intimate something. Well, now they know what I'm talking about. So, it's always really awkward when they look over and they're like, I heard that. And of course, they're just like, they're laughing, but they're also going, that's Dad, you can't say those things. Of course, we always get away with what we can. So it's always funny. Those dad jokes have turned into, oh my God, they get everything now. Oh no.
Yep. Oh mate, it's a never ending thing. And I think we enjoy it more than, it's funny. We normally laugh at our jokes more than everyone else does, but.
Oh yeah. Like I'm always saying, like the girls would say, no one cares. And I'd always say, well, Care Bears care. And they're like, what are you talking about? Because they got no idea about, remember the damn Care Bears ads? Yeah. Anyway, like just crap like that my wife and I would laugh at because, we're that age. It's like that movie, you go and watch, there was one movie, oh my God, it was like the people that wrote it must have been my age or a year older or younger, because everything that we ever watched, every joke was everything that we grew up watching as kids, like these little subtle jokes. It was just, it was brilliant. The Intern, I think it's called, or whatever it's called, when they went to Google, all those jokes, brilliant. So, but the kids were like, "What are you laughing at?"
Yeah, no, thank you so much again for your time, Jason. It's meant a lot, mate. And I'm sure any parent listening to this has learnt a lot for themselves, but also, to hopefully it's empowered them to put their kids through sports and to keep persisting.
Well, parenting, there's no book for that, and it's like you learn as you go. It's one of those great things. So if you're doing a crap job, it's all right. You can get better. If you're doing a great job, well, keep doing it.
That's it. Well said. Thank you.
No worries, brother. Anytime.
Thanks for joining us on Sharing More Than the Sheets. Please make sure you subscribe to be updated with future episode releases, and feel free to share this episode with any friends or family that you think it might benefit. Please visit us at sharingmorethanthesheets.com.au to submit questions or requests for future podcast topics. These podcasts have been brought to you by Better Financial Planning Australia. To book a 15-minute phone chat, visit betterfinancialplanning.com.au.